Welcome. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Michelle Petacola, and this is Good Grief, changing your story so that you can have a better life experience, whether you're recovering from loss or a change in life circumstances. How do you change your story to make yourself feel better? And I'm going to be going through that. But first, I want to give you a little bit of background about me and why you should even be listening to me. I have a PhD in sociology, but that's not necessarily why you should be listening to me. I've been working around grief and loss for more than 20 years. And I got into this whole field, this whole area, because I lost both my parents about 6 months apart. And that was probably well, more than 25 years ago. It's been quite a while. And I was really blown away by that experience because up until that time, I really didn't give death or the loss of somebody important much thought. And so it hit me, it impacted me on an emotional level that I could not have imagined. And being a curious person, I decided to make a film about death because I was curious. I mean, when somebody important to you dies, don't you get curious about, whoa, you mean we died? And so we want to find out. I wanted to find out about that. And I thought the best way would be to make a documentary. And it morphed into 3 documentaries, short documentaries, one on facing death, one on caregiving, and one on grieving. And each one of them were, I guess, vital to my own recovery. And that, in the process of doing that, I joined hospice. And I went and visited people at the bedside. And then I got into the grief aspect of hospice. They have grief support and eventually led grief support groups, particularly or specifically partner loss. And I did that for probably over 5 or 6 years. And then I gradually transitioned because hospice really changed. Hospice changed from this small organization to this kind of corporate mentality. And a lot of people left, and I left and got into being a coach. And I've been working with grief and loss for over 20 years. And let's see, was there anything else I wanted to say about that? Of course, my notes aren't here. Never mind. I had in the beginning a very simple formula for getting over grief. Number 1, you have to allow your feelings. You can't get around it. And I know a lot of us are taught to like tamp those feelings down, repress them. They bother us, they get in the way. If you have a job, they want you to maybe grieve for 5 minutes and then come back to work. And why are you still grieving? So the emotion thing is sometimes a challenge, but it is the key to recovering from grief. It is the key to recovering from any kind of loss, whether it's the loss of another person, or it's the loss of a job, or it's the loss of self-esteem, or it's the loss of purpose. There is a grief, there is a response to that. So that's number 1. Number 2 is social support. When you are grieving, and I'm going to say a little bit more about this when I actually put my PowerPoint up, but when you're grieving, 9 times out of 10, it has something to do with your connection with somebody else. If you move from across the country, suddenly you are separated from your connection with your community, and you have to create a new community. And so in that short amount of time or long amount of time, it's difficult because we as human beings are a social species. We are literally programmed to bond with other people. And when that bond gets broken, we struggle. And I'm going to be saying a little bit more about that in a moment. So that's number 2. And number 3 is changing your story, which is what we're here for today, is to talk about changing your story. I'm going to share my screen and explain the 3 superpowers that will enable you to have a better life adventure. All right, let me get rid of this. And so there are 3 things that you want to work with to have a better life experience. The first one is the body. This is the vehicle that we are provided with to live in this 3-dimensional human reality. It is the way in which we experience life. It is the way in which we navigate, move, survive. And the body is amazing. It does, however, have its own agenda. And that agenda is to keep you alive. I want you to remember this. The body wants to keep you alive. I'm going to go on to a few things and then I'm going to go back to that because I just remembered. So there's the other. Let me explain those 2 things together. The body wants to keep you alive. 300 billion cells, all programmed to keep you alive. And it has a number of systems, chemical systems, to enable you to do that. It has an external system to help protect you from saber-toothed tigers or muggers or angry dogs or irate sister-in-laws. And it has an internal system, the immune system. And believe it or not, the system that takes priority between those 2 is the external. That is, if you're facing a lion or a bear, even if you have the flu, your body's resources are all going to go towards running away from that bear. It'll say, forget about the flu. We need to do this right now because this is important. Now, there is one other element I want to talk about, and that is spirit. So those are the 3 superpowers: the body, others, so we're social beings, and others have a huge impact on us, such as right now, I'm trying to have a huge impact on you. I'm trying to explain to you my paradigm, my way of seeing the world, because I believe it'll help you to navigate this life experience. Spirit is being aware that there is something larger than yourself. I'm very connected to spirit. Spirit is that part of ourselves that is eternal, that continues, that we have a sense of ourselves that doesn't seem to have anything to do with the fact that our body grows and ages and things like that. It has a continuity. Now, you don't have to be a believer to listen to me today. There is a neuroscientist, Antonio Damasio, who wrote a book, and I think it was Finding Spinoza. And he spends a good portion of this book explaining that there is no real proof that spirit exists, that we continue after we die. And then in the last chapter, he says, but those who believe that there is something bigger than themselves, that there is a continuity, there is something more, actually do better in this life. Our bodies like to believe in the spirit. So since we don't really know, you might as well just grab a hold of that and make your life a little bit easier. Now the body, physical, as I said, 300 billion cells, all working to keep you alive. They are programmed to keep you alive. There's that external protecting you from muggers and dogs, and doesn't really protect you very much from cars, But when somebody cuts you off, does your body not react? Do you not feel your heart go louder? Do you not become way more alert? That is the survival response. There is also the emotional. Now, the thing with human beings that is different from other animals, well, not actually, there are other animals that have an emotional component, is that we are heavily influenced by others. We are a social species. So other animals that are social species have a certain amount of grief when they lose a connection to somebody. We are affected by the loss of somebody as though it threatens our survival. In other words, when you lose a connection, a bond with somebody that's really important to you, you are going to go into survival response. Now, you're not going to necessarily see it right away, but if you think about your own experience in life, thinking about a recent loss or a loss that you did have, you will find the three things that they always associate with survival response: fight, flee, and freeze. So I can find many, many examples of fight, flee, and freeze among people who are in grief. They get angry at their doctors. They get angry at their siblings. They get angry at their friends. Or freeze. They get depressed. They can't get out of bed. They spend all day long looking at the TV or sleeping. This is freeze. And flee, that the example I see of that is getting super busy. Renovate the house. Go off on a trip across the country or around the world, or get involved in a project that just keeps your mind off of your loss. So those are all examples of fight, flee, freeze. So the emotional part of the human being is an upgrade from the physical. The physical is this automatic reaction. We don't even have to think about it, right? Somebody cuts us off and the heart starts beating faster and you become hyper alert. You don't have to think about it. The emotional aspect, it was an upgrade because we use the emotions to connect with our past experience. The last part is the mental part of the body, the brain. And this can often give us a lot of difficulty when it comes to grief and loss, because it can recycle over and over again the grief. And I saw that when I first started running grief groups at hospice. The people in that grief group had been there for, some of them for 3 and 4 years. Why? Why were they there so long? Well, there's a problem with the paradigm that they use around grief and loss, especially if they put them in a group that has no specific ending. People come into the grief group and they bond with each other. And of course, they need to bond. They've lost somebody, right? So they need to bond, and they bond with these other people. And what is the essential element to being able to belong in that group? Grieving. Mm-hmm. Right? So they have to grieve. And so they grieve, and then they recycle the grieving, and they tell their story over and over again. And the thing is that the body, the physical aspect of the body, does not know the difference between the immediate experience of losing somebody and the mental memory. It will respond the same way. You can trigger that grief over and over and over again. And there's actually sort of a natural mechanism for doing that is a result of the fact that we have really smart brains that are capable of imagining and problem solving and thinking outside the box. But one of the trade-offs to having such a brilliant brain, I mean, come on, we're like just higher than any other animal out there in terms of creating things and solving problems. But the trade-off is that we can get stuck in these mind loops. I love the example of that a social biologist gave of a gazelle being chased by a lion. And the gazelle is running and running and running, and the lion's chasing after, and it jumps over a canyon or whatever, and leaves the lion behind. So the gazelle goes back to his herd, shakes his body off, gets rid of that energy, and goes back to grazing. Lion forgotten. You take that same lion and chase a human being, and the human being's running and running and running and grabs a hold of a tree and swings across the canyon and escapes the lion. What does the human being do? He goes back to his herd, his tribe. What's the first thing he did? Oh my God, I got chased by a lion, right? Over and over again, he tells the story. And then he goes to sleep that night and he dreams about the lion. And his body, each time he does that, gets re-triggered in that state of panic and fright. So that is part of the problem with the body. So how do we deal with these three elements? How do we navigate the system so that we can recover from grief and loss? Well, you have to take care of your body. Sometimes people, when they're in grief and loss, they don't take very good care of their body. They forget to eat. They sleep all the time. They don't get exercise. So one of the things you want to focus on when you're dealing with grief and loss is your body. And sometimes you need to ask help from other people because you don't have the energy. Let me talk a little bit about the energy. When you lose somebody significant and you're holding your emotions in, it actually takes a lot of physical energy to hold your emotions back. That's one of the reasons why it's exhausting. But the other reason why it's exhausting is because your brain is literally rewiring itself. When you lose somebody who's significant, that is a huge part of your life, everywhere you go, every time you go to the living room, you remember they're not there anymore. You have to adjust to that loss. And it actually takes a few months for the brain to rewire. So there's the emotional component. We need to release the emotions. And I believe I talked about that last time. You have to release that emotional energy. If you don't, it takes all this physical energy to hold it in, and you kind of live in this gray area. And then finally, the mental. You have to deal with your mind, because whatever your mind thinks about, your body's going to believe it. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment for now. No, I'm actually going to stop this first and then stop sharing. So does anybody have any questions about what I've talked about so far? You can put it in the chat or you can speak out because nobody can see you. No questions? Yes, Susan, what?
Something you said that I never heard before was that it takes some time for our brains to rewire. And could you say something more about that? That's a new thought to me about our brains rewiring.
So there's this whole neural net configuration, right, in your brain. And I'm sure you've heard that those parts of the neural network system that are repeated become stronger, right? So now you got some real strong neural networks, your friendships, your husband, your children, you see them a lot. The more you see somebody in your life, the more that neural network, that one particular path line is really, really strongly in there. So now you've lost them, they're dead, right? And so everywhere you go, you remember that they've died. And so your brain is kind of running along, you're going into the living room or you're waking up in the morning and suddenly you hit this like big, huge chasm, this big black hole. And your brain is like, how am I going to deal with that? Your brain has to develop new neural networks to handle that. And until you do that, your body goes into shock every time it remembers that they have lost that significant other. I cannot emphasize to you how important those social connections are. We are a social species. It's part of our survival to connect with other people. And I mean, I know right now in this day and age, you don't seem to really need people, but you do. Even though you don't need them to protect you from bears or piranhas or whatever, you need them because it's wired into your system. You need other people to feel comfortable. And by the way, this whole COVID sheltering in place, the whole way in which our world has changed has had a huge impact on human beings. Huge. We're now connecting over this Zoom internet. And in some ways, it has worked. I mean, thank goodness we have it, right? That we can connect with people online. And so we can actually see people and we can feel connected. But I got to tell you, when I go to my grief and loss group in person, it is a whole different experience. First of all, you see everything around you, you hear in a different way, and you sense on a vibratory level other people. Now, I've been told that we will eventually be able to connect with each other on this digital system, probably very much the way which we connect in person. Although we won't be able to touch them, and touch is very, very important. And I know this is not part of grief and loss, but I think that also our immune system depends on us having a certain amount of contact with the other human beings, that we get exposed to germs and certain bacteria that make our immune system strong. And when we don't, and then we go in again, we can get sick more easily. I mean, isn't that what happened to our poor indigenous population? Is people from Europe came over and they were used to like hanging around with each other, and they come into these communities that were very closed and brought all their germs. And those poor indigenous people really died like crazy because they just didn't have the microbiome, the system to survive. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the thoughts. You want to remember that what you think, your body believes. So I want to ask you right now, what are you thinking in your life that maybe is not supportive to your healing? Anybody? Go ahead and put it in the chat, or if you want to speak out loud, because I know, Tina, you that's not good for you. Please tell me, what thoughts are troubling you? What story are you telling yourself that is working against your ability to heal? So I think in the beginning, Susan, you said something about wanting to get over a transition. So what's the thought that you have that's helping, is kind of interfering with your ability to make that transition?
Are you asking me particularly, or?
I am.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
I know. I knew you. I knew going to talk. So
not seeing what the end place is, I can't see where to get to. So that I want to be there already, but I don't know what it is.
Okay. So you need to get somewhere, but you don't know where you're going. Do you have any sense of where you want to go? What would you, if you were to arrive there, how would you want to feel?
I want to feel like I used to feel.
And how was that?
Clearer.
Okay.
Clearer.
Okay.
Not so unknowing.
Uh-huh. Okay. All right. So there is some way in which you have to surrender to this process. And the clearer, I have a hunch about this, but I'll get back to you in a minute because there's some other people have decided to write some stuff in here. I want to feel safer, more safe. And this is DB. Yes. Can you say it a little bit more about that? You want to feel safer. How are you not feeling safe?
In my neighborhood.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, it's a ubiquitous problem, yeah, with homeless people and then I live in a condo complex where the people next door, I mean, there are a lot of great people in this condo complex. However, there's a unit next door that's been do you hear that siren in the background?
I don't, fortunately. So go ahead.
Yeah. They've just caused a lot of problems and vandalism and stuff, and they really need to get out of here. But I have to feel safe
Yes.
knowing what they're doing.
So does this not totally fit in with my paradigm about that need for feeling safe? That if you aren't feeling safe, then that triggers that survival response and you feel uneasy and it puts stress on your body, doesn't it? You are stressed because you aren't able to ever relax. We're going to talk about the thoughts in a minute. I just want to check with the rest of you. So Nicholas says, isolation seems to be mine. Seems that in some way loss makes you toxic to some. The trauma seems to make people allergic. Very good point, Nicholas. Yes. People sometimes are afraid that grief is catching, that whatever you've lost, whoever you've lost, it is so scary to other people that they want to avoid you because they're afraid that somehow that in inviting you in, it's going to invite that problem in for them. That's part of it. The other part is people haven't the clue, they don't have a clue how to respond to you, how to help you. And so it's just easier to avoid you. And it is true that people who are grieving are difficult to deal with because it's almost hard to get it right. Either you give them too much attention and they want you to leave them alone, or you don't give them enough attention, or you say the wrong thing, or you don't know the right thing. Yeah, that we should have classes on how to deal with people who are in grief, how to be there. And of course, it is sort of the nature of human beings that and also we're taught this, is we want to help people. We want to get them healed as quickly as we can. And learning to just be present with somebody is a challenge. And I know I have that problem because I want to fix everything too. So it's like you have to hold that back, and people aren't used to that. Okay. Anybody else want to put something in before I go on? So how can we change our thoughts? How can we think about our situation in a different way? This is usually where I go to spirit. When I go into that place of seeing myself as a spiritual being having a human adventure, I see that everything that happens in my life is beneficial. That, like the poet Rumi, he wrote this lovely poem called The Guest House. He says, invite everything in, even the emotions that feel really grotty, that feel really uncomfortable. Invite everything in because it's all part of your adventure. It's all part of why you're here and what you have to learn. And as you get in more and more into that place, that state of mind, it becomes easier to see how it could be beneficial to you. So, Susan, for you, for example, you are in a transition period. Things are not put together. Did you move? What's the transition? Is it from working on a project to no longer having a project?
No, I lost my partner in the past year.
Well, excuse me, that is huge. That is huge, yes. So there are several things. You want to take care of your body, which was one of the things I said at the beginning. You want to provide yourself with social support. Do you do that? Do you have people in your life that you can go to and talk to? Great. You want to hug somebody at least once a day, preferably 5 times a day. You want to hug people, because that's what
not so easy these days to be around.
I know. Well, you can have a pet, you can hug a pet, or hug a tree, but the body needs that contact. It really does. That's what's so hard these days, right? Is you can't hug people, and we really need that. They did those experiments with monkeys. I'm sure any of you have ever taken a psychology class know about how they had those little monkeys, those little baby monkeys, and they put them on a terry cloth surrogate mom and a wire one, and they all clung to the terry cloth. I mean, how pathetic, those poor little traumatized monkeys. But we need that comfort, that softness. And when we don't have it, it is traumatic to the body. It's difficult. So, you just have to sometimes, if you have a pet, that's great, because they're right there, they're for you. Yeah, honey, I'm here for you. Yeah, pet me, hug me, love me, and they'll give you love back. Pillows are not quite as good, although I know in my experience as a grief and loss coach that some people will hold on to the clothing of the person that they lost and smell it and hold it as a way of being comforted. You might even make a teddy bear out of their pajamas. Okay, so that's one thing, is that you need to acknowledge the feelings. You also need to allow the feelings. You need to grieve. Have you been able to do that? I mean, I know we were brought up to not grieve. Have you allowed yourself to cry? Do you allow yourself to cry? You do. Good. Do you have trouble stopping the crying?
Well, I had the experience that because of the circumstances, I would say I didn't grieve for a long time because there was a very positive thing about how the end came. I mean, I felt like I was able to help him have the death he wanted. And eventually I got over that.
Yeah, that lasted for like a couple of weeks.
That lasted for a while.
Great, right? You got into that sort of spiritual state of connection with the divine. I got it. And then you came back into this body.
Then it shifted. So I would say it's not like I was rocked with grief when it happened. It feels like that was delayed. It's so
absolutely.
So then
absolutely.
It shifts to another thing now.
So Susan, have you ever accessed my little illustrated guide, Essentials for Grieving Well? It's on my website.
I don't think so. I'll
okay, you might want to do that.
Okay.
Because not only is it a charming little book of all my cute little cartoons, but it has really good information, and it's followed up with emails that will take you to blogs I've written on grief and loss, which you would have to spend a lot of time finding, but it'll give you the link. So I would highly recommend that you go ahead, and that's what is it, griefessentials.com, and I will put those in the chat later on, but it's griefessentials.com. It's got really, really good information.
Thank you.
So that will help you to start to allow the feelings, and you just need to do that, because that's your journey right now. I know it's been a year, but I worked with a woman who had been grieving her husband's loss for 20 years. I mean, actively, until she actually allowed herself to grieve. And it just hangs around in there. I know after my husband left me, I didn't grieve, and I joined a spiritual community, and I got into very, very high states, and I thought I had kind of like bypassed it. And then I got involved in a new relationship, and then that guy left me. And then, oh my gosh, I cried, and I needed to. And my belief is that the universe gives us exactly what we need. Maybe not right away, but it's there. It's gonna, if you haven't done the work, it will provide you with some opportunity. So now we want to look at DB. Is that Deborah? Is your name Deborah or Dorothy?
Diane.
Diane, that's right. That's right, Diane. Sorry, I forgot about that. So
Sorry.
Diane. So you're living in a condo that doesn't feel safe, but you don't really have any choice. You have to live there, right? You can't move, or it's not easy to move, or it's a lot of work to move, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of work and I wouldn't know where to go.
And where would you go? You might go out of the frying pan into the fire, right?
Exactly. You know, I mean, I think there's something to be done internally.
Right, right. That's where I bring in that spiritual component. And that is, what am I meant to learn? What is divine or the universe asking me to learn from this? As opposed to that place of resistance and frustration, to become curious. And that is one of the tools for changing your mindset. You might want to allow the feelings first. My experience is that it's very hard to change your mindset if you have not allowed your feelings. So you might want, like something happens, you're out there walking and some homeless person really confronts you or whatever and makes you feel uncomfortable. You need to let that emotion go. Or any of the stories that you have in your head about how this is not okay, you need to get to the core of the emotions. And so, by the way, I have a special gift for people who are having a hard time releasing their emotions. And that's number one. You got to release your emotions before you can start to change the mindset. I know this, and I'm always trying to bypass it. It never works. You have to let those emotions out. So it's called Release and Thrive, www.releaseandthrive.com, and you can get an audio, digital audio that you can listen to that will help you to get inside your body and find out where you're holding your resistance. And of course, any of you are here. It's not just for these people. If you think this might be right for you, go ahead and access these gifts. Yes, you have to give your email to me. Some of you probably already are on my list, so it won't make any difference to you. So thank you, Diane, for sharing your conflicts, your issues. But to start to allow yourself to acknowledge how this has been impacting you.
Yeah.
To allow the feelings. And then you can start to shift to that place of curiosity. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right, you're welcome. And then Tina, how about you? Do you have anything for me that you could use help on?
I'm just following along here and everything is resonating for me. So
Awesome.
I'm not sure I have anything particularly specific. Thanks.
Okay. So if something comes up for you later, I do have, you can schedule a 15-minute consultation or conversation with me, and that's at meetwithdrmichelle.com. So you aren't taking advantage of this right now, but you can later. And right now, there's a code, and I will put that on the screen later on to not get charged the full amount, but I may actually change that so that it's free for you guys that came today. Okay, so Judy, how about you? Do you have anything that you want to share before we end today? Because this stuff makes so much more sense when we talk about it in practical terms, doesn't it? It's like it has content here, has weight.
Absolutely. Of course, we all know some of this is obvious and we've heard it in different ways, and it's just so good to rehear it. and remind ourselves, because I get so much other input that's just dragging and clutter, and you have a great presentation, and I like your ideas and how to tune in, and instead of the negative, say, what do I want? How do I want to feel? Instead of, it's just bugging the hell out of me, this person in that situation, and inheritances and crazy stuff going on. It's
Oh,
like,
inheritances. Yes, that is a rabbit hole. That one is a really difficult one. I just went through that for the last 5 or 6 years with my husband and the loss of his parents and conflict among siblings. And didn't I tell you that one of the things about losing a bond is that it triggers that survival response? So that fight is just one way in which people deal with their grief and loss, is they fight with their siblings. There's another saying that I often share with people, and that is that legacy equals love. And if there's ever been a feeling amongst your siblings that somebody got more of the love than somebody else, that desire to acquire the legacy, or as much of the legacy as they can, it's very compelling. It's very difficult for them not to do that.
you hit it on the nail on the head. Yeah, that's for sure.
I totally know that one. So, Nicholas, how about you? You are struggling with isolation. Did you lose a partner? Is that who you lost? It's okay if you don't want to share, but this is your opportunity. A stepson and both parents. Oh, I'm so sorry. So parents are important. They are your history. They're part of who you are, right? You've inherited part of who they are. And it's a bit of a shock. Now, stepson, I don't know what your relationship, but if he was young and he died and he was important to you, losing a child is probably one of the biggest and most difficult losses there is out there. And so it would not surprise me that people would want to avoid you, because even the thought of losing a child is so horrific to people that they shy away from it, like it's, radioactive. It's so scary. So for you, Nicholas, yeah, I would definitely go and get that Essentials for Grieving Well. And I would also definitely go ahead and pick up that audio tape to check in with your feelings inside, because you want to release those emotions before you start changing your mindset. And as long as you feel people are not there for you, you're going to keep on chasing them away energetically. You're going to see them as sort of abandoning you. So you want to change that story, but you can't change the story until you allow the feelings. And you need to allow, the biggest thing is that you're feeling isolated, or you're feeling abandoned because these people left you, that they died. And now, depending on how they died, that could add extra things. Like, for example, if your stepson died in an accident, or somebody killed him, or whatever it is, it's unfair, because children are not supposed to die before their parents. I mean, that's sort of the cultural belief. It doesn't happen that way, and so when they die, it's really, really difficult. And then the parents, it depends on what your relationship is with your parents also. Were there things that were unfinished? And those are things that you may need to work through as part of your process of healing. So I'm going to put up my screen share again and give you the links that I talked to you about. On the big screen. Let's see. Okay, so we did that. Physical, emotional, mental. And so this is the essentials, griefessentials.com, and this is where you can get the graphic guide for early stages of grief. And Nicholas, I would highly encourage you to do that. There's a lot of good information in the blogs that it will refer to. You'll get those in the emails later. And then Release and Thrive is the emotional release practice audio that will allow you to release some of the emotions that are stuck in your body, that will really, over time, will do damage to your body if you don't release it. And I will put that in the chat. And then here's something I didn't talk to you about. So I have a meditation class once a week on Fridays. And this helps you to connect with that higher self. It's not for everybody, but if it resonates with you, you can come, you can try it out. It's movement meditation. It isn't sitting meditation. And there's sound meditation as well. But if this appeals to you, it can be very, very effective in helping you to shift the mindset. It makes it much easier to shift the way in which you're seeing your life, because suddenly you realize that everything is the way it's supposed to be. And you just need to find out what it is that you're supposed to learn from what your situation is. There was a Sufi story about a man, I guess he was a farmer, and he had these beautiful horses, and everybody in his community complimented him on his beautiful horses. And he had this gorgeous stallion. And one day the stallion ran away, and everybody said, "Oh, that's so terrible. We're so sorry that you lost your beautiful stallion." And he said, "Well, you know, you just can't tell whether it's good or bad until the end." And by, the stallion came back with a bunch of beautiful mares. And everybody said, "Oh, how hallelujah, fantastic. Your horses brought back all these beautiful mares. How wonderful, how fortunate you are." And again, he said, "Well, you never can know until the end. You just don't know whether it's good or bad." And so by, his son goes and rides on the stallion, falls off and breaks his leg. I mean, really hurts his leg badly. And so everybody's like, "Oh, whoa, this is so terrible. How horrible for you that your son, now he can't help you on your farm. This is so awful." And by, the state decided to have a war, and they conscripted all the young men. But this farmer's son did not have to go because he had a broken leg. And so he was not sent off to the front, and he did not lose his life. And so once again, they said, "Oh, you're so lucky." But he said, again, you just never know until the end. Okay, so let's see, one more thing. That's meetwithdrmichelle.com. It's DR. And so if you want to have a session with me, use the discount code BOLD, capital with a 1, and you can get a discount on having time with me. And for you, I will change it so that there is no charge. If you want some extra private help and you want to know how I can help you further, which is of course part of the reason for having a conversation, is how, I mean, you know, how much can I help you out in a half hour, an hour? That's the purpose of that. Okay, so I am going to put those links, maybe, oops, get those links from somewhere and put them in the chat so that it makes it easier for you. Did I put them here? No. Okay. I know I had a, oh, here we go. These actually are direct links, so you can use them. We have about 4 minutes left. Does anybody have any final questions? Yes, Diane.
Will we have access to the recording of today?
Yes, I will give you access to the recording of today. And if none of your pictures are going to show because I've spotlighted myself the whole time, but some of your stories will show up. I'd love to have permission to have that in the recording. Is that okay? Does anybody not want to have me share any of your stuff? Because I will take it out if you don't want me to. Okay. Yeah, because people can relate to it, you know, and then it becomes valuable to them. But your picture at the top won't show up. Only me.
Or the name.
Or the name. That's absolutely not. Yeah.
Yeah, I think my story is fairly common.
Yes, I think
You
it
know,
is.
I think it's happening. But you said something, I even wrote down the time you said it. So there's just this pearl of wisdom. I'm going to search for that when we get the recording. Thank you
Awesome.
for today.
Okay, so last thing I want to ask you, and if you would please post it in the chat or say it out loud, Tina, what's your big takeaway from today? And did you get what you were hoping for? So Diane, you're shaking your head, but come on, what's your big takeaway?
My takeaway is something that I heard you say, but I don't know what it was.
Oh,
When I get
okay.
the recording, I know what time to go to, and there was
Okay.
like, oh, yeah, many
Okay.
little takeaways too. Thanks.
Okay, great. And Susan, how about you? What's your takeaway?
Yeah, trust the process.
Trust the process. Absolutely. So I'm going to tell you briefly a little story. I have a friend who had knee surgery. I'm sure there are plenty of people who know that, you know, that's one of the things we do now is we get bionic knees. And she's having a real hard time sleeping because the nerve endings are all freaking out. Plus, I think that she already had a problem with sleeping. So she is exhausted and she's not getting any sleep. And she keeps on trying to do a lot of stuff in the day so she'll sleep at night. And I finally said to her, you know, you need to trust the process. You need to trust that your body will do the right thing. When you are tired, sleep. Don't worry whether it's night or day. Do what your body tells you to do. Trust your body. And that's what I'm telling you. Trust your body. Trust the emotions. Allow them. And if you get stuck in them, reach out to me because I can tell you, I can show you how to not wallow in your tears. Tina, what about you? What are you taking away?
I think for me, part of trusting the process is patience. And so you're just really encouraging me in.
Yes, patience. But also work on allowing the feelings, because patience by itself is not enough. You know, that old adage, time heals all wounds. It doesn't. You have to, if you break your arm and you don't get it set, it's going to be really weird. So you need to do the work to help you to get to the other side. Otherwise, you can be grieving all your life. Judy, how about you? What are you taking away from today?
Well, everything all above, and also it's just wonderful to know that there's this supportive connection that is out there, and appreciate that, even knowing that and having this reinforcement and somewhere to go when needed.
Great.
It's a great resource, and thank you.
You're so welcome, Judy. And Nicholas, how about you? Are there any last things that you want to share with us about today and what you got from the talk? I know you're trying to find how to turn off the mute, aren't you? It's really important to say something because when you say it, you make it real.
It's in the chat.
He found
he
it.
put in the chat, I think I need to work on releasing feelings. Yes, you do. Nicholas, I highly recommend that you schedule some time with me, or at least start with the audio and see if that helps you, the audio Release and Thrive. That's it for today. You guys have been awesome. It's been really fun
Thank you.
and interesting.
Thank you very much, Michelle.
You're very welcome. And we will close now. You have a great weekend and see you next time. Bye for now.
Thank you
Thank you.
very much. I've been trying for a long time to get here. I've been getting your emails for a long time, and I'm glad I got here. Thank you.
Awesome, Tina. Thank you. Take care.